Hello, welcome to Self Yoga. I'm Courtney Brain. This is another session from the Letting Go series where I speak from notes that I've taken from the book Letting Go by David R. Hawkins as a way of teaching us to identify and navigate and understand the emotions that we may be experiencing that we might not have been taught how to. So join me today on your mat or on your floor, wherever you are. Today I'll be teaching from the floor. We will do some stuff that's going to have us on our fours, our hands and knees. So please, whatever you need to do in order to take care of yourself, do so. I invite you to have a pillow of some sort if that's something that you'll need, because we'll be in a lunge position, but we'll also do our floor stuff. All right. Last time we did a lot more movement. Today, I want to give you more stillness to sit with the emotion that we're going to be covering today, which is pride. All right. Now, from wherever you are, go ahead and come into a comfortable seat. Allow for yourself to just take note of what your breathing feels like. Are you breathing through your nose? Are you noticing an evenness of the oxygen that comes in on one side versus the other nostril? Do you notice any change in your body as you breathe? As you take your inhale, are you resisting allowing the breath to work its way into the body by perhaps being slouched over or not letting your body do what it wants to do to welcome in the breath? Do you find yourself adjusting your posture to breathe more fully? Now, as you breathe, please focus on exaggerating the exhales. Oftentimes, we may take just a short breath going in and out, and we don't realize how we're breathing. Not taking full breaths deprives us of the fullness of life, as breath is life or indicative of life as well. So, why not allow it? Why not accept it fully? Okay. All right. So, from wherever you are, I'll ask you to make your way onto all fours. Oh, I did legs yesterday, y'all. I'm sore. I'm gonna try and do as much of this as I can with y'all. All right. So to begin with, what we're gonna do is come onto all fours, place your hands underneath the shoulders, separate the fingertips as wide as you can, grip down into the mat with the tips of your fingers, and then try and turn your elbows inward so that the bend of your elbow is facing more forward. Take your knees underneath your hips and then bring the big toes together back behind you. And then slowly send the hips back toward the heels as you press into the palms of the hands and come into a child's pose. So here your arms are extended. You'll want to try and lower your forearms down to the ground. You may hear some cracking in your back like mine just did, but we really want to just focus on noticing what it feels like to bring the hips down to the heels and just take note. Maybe they don't stay there. Maybe it calls for you to add some awareness to the hips in order to press them down towards your heels. All we want to do at this point is just be here. Okay. And just continue to breathe and notice what your body does in order to receive the breath from that child's pose. Notice if it's still coming in through the chest or if the breath is coming and expanding the back of the body, right? So we're breathing in order to expand the diaphragm, or we're expanding the diaphragm in order to breathe. Both of these things are happening at once. Then as you exhale, see if you can relax more into the pose. We'll be here for 3 minutes. All right, so today we're on chapter 9, which is pride. Pride is often thought to be a good thing, yet it's devoid of love. This looks like arrogance, denial. Someone may be holier than thou, selfish, spoiled, unforgiving, and it can also be very pigeonholing. Spiritual pride is the block to spiritual growth. Take religious pride, which makes people justify wrongdoings as a result of what their beliefs are. Pride will rather give up the life than be wrong on the altar of pride. We look at masculine pride like the role of men in society, these role models that we have, right? These are also blocks to the emotional capacities of us men. Now, when we talk about men and emotions, or when what we might have heard is that men aren't supposed to have emotions, men aren't supposed to cry, men are supposed to be strong, we don't do feelings, right? These may be some messages that you will have heard if you are someone who's been socially conditioned as a man, if you've been around more old school men who try and give you this idea of what it means to be a man, what masculinity is, right? But the reality is that these role models, I'm sorry, they block us. So us as men, we do have a far greater capacity for emotionality. And I always say this, the most logical people that I know, despite them thinking they're not emotional, are the most emotionally driven people that I know, right? Because they're so certain about themselves. They know that there's a wrongdoing or a right path for them that aligns with them. And so their logic is often fueled by their emotions. And that also works in the inverse. Our emotions can be fueled by our logic. We can logically make ourselves go, oh, I should be feeling this. And we can sort of psych ourselves into that, but what ultimately happens is that even when that's going on, there may be something else going on about what's going on. And that's such a weird thing to think about it. But if we are using our mind to trick ourselves into a state of emotions, we also have emotions about that process. And there's an underlying emotion towards the thing that we think that we need to change our emotion about. But the reality is, we have feelings, we have emotions about things. And it's really on us to identify what that is so that we can live in a state of truth. All right, go ahead and take one more deep breath in. And then as you exhale, go ahead and walk your hands over toward the right side. We're going to take a side bend here. So you're just walking your arms over toward the right. Press the left hip down toward your heel. So we're staying in that child's pose, only we're lengthening through the side body. We'll be here for a minute and a half. Just continue to breathe. Pride is extremely vulnerable to criticism, and that also increases a person's fear. It has to defend all of its attachments. Now, remember, we talked about attachment being a cause of a lot of the fears that we have and negative emotions. But it has to defend its attachments of its identity. I don't know what that was, y'all. That hit me out of nowhere, but make sure you keep water nearby you, all right? Okay. Take one more big inhale, and then as you exhale, we'll walk the hands over to the opposite side, lengthening out the right side body, pressing that right hip down into the heels. So we're still in that child's pose position, only now we're stretching out the right side. Okay. We'll be here for a minute and a half as well. So as I was saying, pride is vulnerable to criticism, and it increases a person's fear. And with that, pride has to defend all of its attachments of its identity. And I use sexual pride as an example, right? Uh, Men typically needing to last longer or having to be big, having a big penis, um, being good in bed, oftentimes. And this was part of Cam Frazier's talk for the Men's Emotional Wellness Symposium on June 30th. We have the recording, access to that is available as well. Um, He spoke about men seeking gratification rather than pleasure. And it's very prideful to stick to the social narratives that have been handed down to us, being that this is what sex is supposed to be like. We're supposed to do sex to a woman and make her blank, or a partner and make them blank, make them scream, make them tap out, make them have an orgasm. But what about us? And even with that pride, the selfishness of making another person do blank is really for our own ego, because that's not what sex is supposed to be about, right? Go ahead and take one more big inhale, and then as you exhale, work your way back through center. And just finishing that point up, here you can just take cat cows. You can come onto all fours, knees underneath the hips, hands underneath the shoulders, and just as you inhale, lift the heart, lowering the belly down toward the mat. And then as you exhale, round your shoulders, bringing your belly in towards your spine, continuing to do so at that pace of breathing. You can incorporate any hip rotations in either direction as well. And we'll do that for a minute while I just finish up what I was saying about sex here and pride. So, men typically, in our examples of sex, if we're looking at the media, we're the initiators. We're supposed to always want it. We're supposed to want to satisfy our partner, right? But who's satisfying us? How do we identify what our own needs are, right? So this kind of goes back to what we said earlier, just about pride being in the way of our emotional capacity, because we have emotions about sex. Even if that's no emotions about sex, that's still an emotion for us to explore. But when we look at how we view sex and we start to invite curiosity and challenge what our beliefs are, what we think about sex, we may learn something about ourselves, in that maybe we're not enjoying sex as much as we could, or maybe there's something different that we would like, that we think we're going to get from sex, and really it's something else. So exploring this and looking at it from a place of uh, not necessarily pride, but starting to look at the pride that we have around our sexuality might teach us something new. Okay, so from where you are, what we'll do is come back through center, and you can watch me here if you need to. Hands underneath the shoulders, knees under the hips. We're going to take a big inhale, reaching the left arm up towards the sky. Reach those fingertips up toward the ceiling. And then as you exhale, go ahead and take the back of your hand right behind the right wrist and lowering that left ear down to the mat. And you'll be looking towards your right side. And here we're gonna feel this gentle twist. All right. Try and keep your hips as square as you can and feel that rotation in the spine. And we'll stay here for a minute and a half, and then we'll rotate sides. All right. When we begin to let go of pride, what happens is that we get an inner sense of security, and that inner sense of security from the sexual sense, right, is we start to realize, like, oh, I don't need to perform this thing. And we can start to look at what pleasure is, what pleasure feels like, what pleasure looks like. And we start to see that the places that we may have learned about sex, the kind of sex that's being had there is not necessarily supposed to be good for us. It's supposed to be good to watch, but not experience. And so much of everything that we're talking about through the Let It Go series really revolves around presence. So the core of all of this is being able to be present. If we're not present, we don't know that we're experiencing pride. We don't know that pride is our block to actual emotional connection and availability. Sometimes um, some of our partners may say to us, well, what do you want? And that's a real good question, because I think if we really sit with it, a lot of us don't know what we want or what we like. And it's a very difficult conversation to uh, have, because we then have to get vulnerable and think to ourselves, well, what do I like? What have I done in the past? I've been doing all these things that I haven't liked. Go ahead and bring yourself back through center. Come back onto all fours, hands underneath the shoulders, knees under the hips. And then we'll do that same thing the opposite direction. Take that inhale, reach the right arm up to the sky, fingertips wide. And then as you exhale, take the back of the right hand and forearm and elbow down behind the left hand. And you'll twist gently, bringing your right ear down to the mat. And we'll be here for a minute and a half. So we let go of pride and we feel that inner sense of security, mostly because we also find out who we are and what we identify with, how we identify, right? Ourselves. And it's not going to be a matter of being afraid of our insecurities, because even with pride, like, it's a mask of our insecurities, and there's where overcompensation comes. Maybe you don't like the size of your penis, so with your partner you may spend more time performing oral on them to hopefully satisfy them in order to not experience whatever feelings you expect to receive from them, for not delivering upon the expectations of what we think sex is supposed to be like for us as men to our partner. So, what's, oh, I'm sorry. Defensiveness invites attack, and pride defends all of itself. So, if you are not happy with the size of your penis, and we're just using sex as the example here because I think that this is one most of us can resonate with, and if someone were to point out that insecurity, your pride may make you, want to inflict harm. Like, oh, you think it's little? Well, I'll show you little. And then here's where potentially abusive behavior can come. Unless this type of thing is pre negotiated with your partner, then this is completely uncalled for. But a lot of us may do this without knowing we're responding from an insecurity rather than an awareness of what's going on. Go ahead and come out of that position there. Make your way back onto all fours. And then bring the big toes together, widen the knees, and then you can send your hips back one more time as you exhale. And just notice if there's any difference here in how low you're able to bring your hips down toward your heels. Notice if there's any more ease of breathing. And we'll stay here for 2 minutes this time. So, uh, yeah, when we say defensiveness invites attack, right? Like, we attack people, right? Think about some time that, someone may have challenged your manhood. If you've gone out and someone's like, oh, you weak, or, you're not a man. Nobody says that, but in ways it happens, like, oh, you can't drink. And then you see maybe that starts a fight. That's the kind of defensiveness that pride can cause. And even on much smaller scales, just a simple observation by someone on something that we have a lot of pride about, such as like driving a particular kind of car, right? So if we have this pride about this particular kind of car, like, oh yeah, I got this. This is what it means about me. And if someone calls out perhaps what you really feel on the inside, but you may not be conscious of because of your pride making you be so defensive and on edge all the time, this can cause for you to maybe say something you don't mean or take an action that you don't mean. So imagine letting go of that defensiveness that you don't even know exists with the pride that you may have about uh, some attachments, something that means something about your identity to you. So, what is healthy pride? Self esteem, which is self awareness of one's true value, which is not to be defended. Connecting with our inner greatness is sufficient because we truly know that which is different than pride. This is what David R. Hawkins says here. And that healthy pride being self esteem, again, it's just awareness of your own true value, those intangible aspects of yourself, your identity, who you are, not what you are associated with. But when you release your attachments from your career, your relationships, your social life, your hobbies, your money, what's left? Who's left? There's just that intrinsic value. Take one more big breath in, and then exhale, sigh it all the way out. And next, what we'll do is some wrist stretches. We probably should have done this earlier, actually. But from all fours, go ahead and place your hands on the ground beneath you, going outward toward the sides of the room. And here we'll just wave left to right. You can make some gentle circles in either direction. And we won't be here long at all. We'll actually just spend a minute here. And then after we go from side to side, what we'll do is bring the fingertips in toward us so that the front of the elbows, where it folds, is facing forward. And then we'll just relax, rest here, and just move as you see fit. We'll go for a minute there. And then for the last ones, we'll keep one hand down at a time so that most of our weight is on our knees and then on the hand where the palm's down. And then on the other, we'll roll the fingernails, fists, knuckles onto the mat to stretch out the back of the wrist and forearm. And then we'll switch, okay? So I'll talk you through each of those. But go ahead and begin with the hands with the fingertips pointed out to the side, and we'll just sway side to side and or make shoulder rotations. All right, and I'm gonna adjust my seat here. All right, 1 minute. When we have pride in our possessions and in our organizations and our opinions, these things lead to constant conflict. Now remember, pride leads to defensiveness, and the defensiveness invites attack. So naturally, when we have pride in things or where we work or our affiliations, we invite attack and we invite conflict. Think about how if we love our family, we love our possessions, we really no longer have to be defensive about them. When true recognition replaces pride, it's a solid position and it's never up for debate. Pride says that there is doubt that has not cleared up. Whereas when we have this solid and firm position, nobody can like make us think anything else. Go ahead and rotate the fingertips in towards your body so that the front of your forearms are facing outward away from you. 1 minute here. So for your family, right? Like, there may be a sense of pride there. Like, oh yeah, I'm proud. I have a family. You know, this is what the achievements are of my offspring. And then the first time that they don't have that achievement, now you feel the need to defend or justify what you've said before about your children's successes and how smart they are or how well they do in school. The minute something changes, now not only is there potential for outer conflict because of the incongruence. If someone were to say, "Oh, I thought you said your kid got straight A's," now you get defensive, right? Why can't it just be, "Oh, this is my family. I love them, who they are, not what they have or what they do, what they give you. It's just them being there." And this is part of what he means by connecting with our inner greatness, because we know that this is so much different than on a prideful level where we're thinking. Like, we know this true inner essence, whereas we think, oh, hold on 1 second. Come out of that posture, and now we'll place the left hand down on the mat, back of the right hand, starting with the fingernails, fingers, knuckles, fist. We'll be here for 1 minute and then we'll switch sides. But pride being the sort of mask for what the insecurity may be about it, and the knowing of the truth. I mean, right? Like, when I say knowing the truth, and what's difficult for me here is trying to maintain things at like an emotional level where we can, hopefully bridge this communication gap between things being super out there spiritual to just being able to be understood. So if I do this where I'm looking away and trying to find words, that's really all that is. Because the most simple way here is to identify between pride being other focus and then a sense of self that's not ego focused, but more self focused. And it's interesting because objectively, people view pride as the selfish person. But when you look at the self is really all about you, right? Like I'm all about me in a sense of I'm self aware. These are my truths. I know these things, and now I can live in a way that allows for me to be able to serve others. Go ahead and switch your hands. And that was 75 seconds. So we'll do the same thing on the other side. All right. This time, right hand down, left hand. Take the nails, fingers, fists down to the mat. So I hope that that was a clear enough explanation without me having to go too much into the spirituality of it. And I don't want to turn anybody off from being here because of that. So what we have pride for infers questioning something's worth. When we love something, we embrace its imperfection and we see its perfect evolution. And we don't have to see it as not perfect and devalue the process of its development. So nothing's perfect, and everything that is imperfect is on its way to perfection, right? So, what David R. Hawkins says here, I believe, is that when there is pride, it warrants the question, well, why? Like, why is that so great? Why are you this way? And it doesn't have to be. When you just love yourself, when you love a thing, when you love a person, it just is in all of its imperfections. Someone may get, oh, there's a dent in your car. Like, oh, it's fine. It's just a car. But, it gets me where I need to be. It is the color I like, right? And it comes down to, I just like this. I like what this is. I like what this does for me. I like what it makes me feel. And pride will block us from being able to recognize the true truth about our possessions and attachments. Go ahead and slowly begin to come out of that. You can bring both hands down to the mat, bring the fingertips facing forward. All right. And if you happen to have a strap, pillowcase, towel, whatever, then what we'll do this time is bring it back behind us as close as you can. Okay. And here we're going to open up the shoulders and chest by just bringing the hands together and then pulling down and back, lowering, drawing the shoulder blades back together and trying to bring them down. And what we're doing here is lengthening, we're not lengthening the neck really, but um, we are pulling the shoulder blades back, drawing the arms downward for a stretch through the front of the shoulders. And then here we can also begin to just see what feels good movement wise in the neck area. You can bring your left ear to left shoulder, right ear to right shoulder. We'll be here for a minute and a half. Okay. All right. So the next portion of this is going to talk about humility. As we suppress, if we were to suppress pride out of guilt, that does not work. We can't pretend that we don't have it. People with pride block human connection. So we really need to examine the true nature of pride so that we can surrender pride. Asking what's its purpose, what's its payoff? There's a theme here, right? Like, what's the purpose of this negative emotion? What am I getting out of it? The smaller we feel within, the more we have to compensate for keeping our pride. So everything feels like a threat, everything feels defensive. And the more we feel that way, the more we hold on, and the more that pride, that ego really fights for survival because of its identifications with all of the things that are around us that really hide us from being seen because we see ourselves as small or limited. Humility is experienced as peacefulness and distinct from false modesty, which is the pretense of self diminishment, hoping that one will acknowledge one's accomplishments that one is proud of but won't admit openly. So it's almost like I did something kind of like covert contracts. I did this thing and I expect you to be proud of me, but you're doing the thing for people to be proud of you, but you're just not receiving that acknowledgement, right? So that's what he's speaking about there. Go ahead and take a rest here. Next, we'll just take the left arm across the right side of the body, And then bring your right arm underneath, just above the elbow. And we'll take a twist here. You'll feel that in the shoulder, maybe the left neck region. All right. We'll go 30 seconds there and then switch to the other side. The truly humble person doesn't experience attacks by others. And we see it from that place that a person has an issue with something really doesn't dwell in reality. You think you're pretty good, don't you? This is an example David R. Hawkins uses. This is what a pride response and a humble response would differ. So a prideful response would get defensive. Like, what do you mean by that? You think I'm, yeah, what do you mean? Do I think I'm pretty good? What are you saying? I'm bad? Whereas a humble response just may be an expression of just joy or gratitude. Like, oh, I practice pretty hard. It doesn't have to be something that's defensive. It doesn't have to be something that invites more attack. Go ahead and switch arms. So right arm goes over across the left side body. Speaking of joy and gratitude, pride is a motivator of achievement, which desires recognition of others, but for the pleasure and love of the process. We are invulnerable to the reactions of others when we do things from a place of joy and gratitude. There is no attack when you just like a thing. When someone asks you, "Oh, that's ugly. Why you like that shirt?" "Oh no, I like the color." That's the end of the conversation. Unless they want to keep going. Well, why do you like it? Oh, I just like it. Well, why? No, that typically is where the conversation would shut down. Go ahead and rest here. So now we go into some of my least favorite things, which are lunges. All right. Now, when we do these lunges, we're going to be here for 3 minutes on each side. If you have any sort of support or block, it would be good for you to use those here. But what you want to do is have that back knee down on the mat. You can bring the top of your foot down to the floor, or both feet if you haven't done anything yet. And what we'll do is place the right foot out in front of you. Try and keep the knee above the ankle so that it's not to put too much strain on the joints here. And then keeping the hips square, meaning that they're in line. If you were to take like a broom and place it across your hips, the broom should be as straight as it can be on either side so that we create as much of an alignment as possible in the hips. And then we'll just press down and forward. And here we'll feel a lengthening along the front of the left leg. You might feel something in the glutes as well. And you're going to feel a little bit of intensity in your right quad as well. Okay. So 3 minutes here. Our home, style, schools, work, labels of clothing, making us exploitable. It makes us very exploitable. Pride means that we're easily manipulated, even in our exploitation of our money. And when we can start to, going back to glamour, remove the glamour of the label, it kind of makes you think, how stupid is this? To be manipulated and controlled by media, social pressure, people trying to tell you where you spend your money, how you spend your money, what this thing you buy is supposed to make you feel. When we start to remove the glamour of it, we can really start to see it for what it is. We can also begin to really take pleasure in our possessions. And it's just the attitude of pride that creates fear of those things and fear of losing those things. All right. And going back to that word pleasure, when we talked about sexuality, oftentimes men view sex as good when we're gratified. So we're seeking gratification over pleasure, and how, like, pleasure isn't for us, right? Like when we say or think about the word pleasure, there may be a negative context there. Like, oh, pleasure's for women. I don't do things because it feels good. That's not manly. And this is genuinely a belief that some people have. It's not supposed to feel good, right? To express pleasure oftentimes is associated with femininity or weakness, whereas we're supposed to be strong and dominant and inflict pain. Like nothing makes me feel good or soft. No, rub my head. Give me a gentle massage. Like I like that, right? So I ain't too proud to admit that some things feel pleasurable. And a lot of us don't even know what pleasure is, maybe even outside of a sexual context. And that's why I'm speaking to that in my examples, because it's even difficult for me, other than food, right? Like food is often a pleasurable experience that most people can relate to. Oh, this tastes so good. You can describe the flavors and the sensations in your body and the experience of you sharing a meal with somebody, right? We can speak to these things so well. But then when it comes to sex, it's just I made her, I made them blank. And like that's the extent of it. Well, what did you feel? I'm not talking about that. These are things that we get to work on with the practice of letting go and these techniques. And if you haven't gotten the book already, I'm not doing it justice with this. This is just my offering, incorporating some movement into it and using my own words, but you may have your own interpretation of the actual text. Go ahead and take a rest here. So from your lunge, go ahead and begin to slowly work your way, not necessarily out of it. But what we want to do is perhaps walk that right foot forward and then begin to send the right hip back so that we have a lengthened hamstring stretch here. And we'll be here for a minute and a half, and then we'll switch legs and do both of those on the other side as well. Pride upholds guilt, which upholds fear, and all of that to uphold the possessions which we are so attached to. Therefore, we uphold a constant fear or a potential loss, which is a loss of peace of mind. The opposite of pride is simplicity. I think I live a very simple price. You see what's around me. And I've never been happier. For so much of my life, I've pursued more money, a better job position, something that pays more, uh, something that came with more status, more partners, more friends. And I have the fewest friends I've ever had, the fewest partners that I've ever had, which is one. I've got like the fewest belongings in my apartment complex. And it's so simple to me. Go ahead and work your way back forward into that lunge to make your way out of this. Okay. And then bring that right knee underneath the right hip. And you can do I had some pop. You can do a couple of hip circles and rotations here for yourself. Okay. And next, we'll switch sides, bringing the left foot through. Try and keep the hips square. And then be sure not to overwork the joints by pressing forward too much. Try and keep that left knee above the left elbow. All right, now if it's out by the toes, you may feel comfortable there, but let's not do that. Let's keep the muscle engaged in this posture. All right, 3 minutes here. So the opposite of pride is simplicity. And I just gave you an example of simplicity, but think about some ways that maybe you have simplicity in your life and maybe what some of your beliefs are or what some of your beliefs have been about simplicity. The rich, prideful person with alarms and defensiveness versus a rich, simple person framing it differently with no alarms or criticism. So this was a note that I wrote, which is terrible. It's terribly written, but David R. Hawkins speaks about an example of someone who is wealthy, they have a lot of possessions, and they just never lock their door. Someone asked her, they were like, "Well, why do you keep your door unlocked? You got all this stuff in here. Like, aren't you worried about someone stealing it?" And her response is like, "Oh, heavens no. Like, if they want it, they can just take it." That mindset of such a detached mindset and it's not detached in the sense of whatever happens, happens. I don't care. But it's whatever happens, happens. I hope that it's for the betterment of the person. Think about that. The ability to hold something in mind in that neutral sense. She's just like, oh, well, if they need it, let them take it. On the other end of that with pride is it's mine. Those are my belongings. I'm locking it. Everybody wants my stuff. You're always on edge. You're always defensiveness. You think everybody's out to get you. Imagine if you are a wealthy person with a lot of possessions. Which of these two mindsets would you rather have? Which one do you think offers you more of a sense of peace? Being able to leave your doors unlocked, and also, right, like this person's never been robbed, the one who keeps her doors unlocked. Maybe she has and she doesn't know it. But then on the other end, you have the person who has all of the security, the locks, the paranoia, and this person, maybe they beefed up security because someone has tried to come and take what's theirs before. Maybe they've had something taken before. And the pride of, I worked hard for this, it's mine, it belongs to me, the me, my, mine, that's something that I'm sure we're going to talk about a little bit later in this chapter as well. So we can take, oh, wait, I already said that part. Hold on, sorry. So it isn't what we have, but it's how we hold it in mind. When we look at consciousness, that's really what matters, and it's meaning to us, right? So it's not what we have, but how we hold it in consciousness that matters. Possessiveness and attachment are the causes of suffering through the fear of loss. These are the consequences of pride. Go ahead and begin to extend that left leg. You can maybe scoot or walk that left foot forward. And then keeping the right knee on the ground, go ahead and begin to peel that left toes off the ground so that you send your hips backward, lengthening out that left hamstring. And we'll be here for 1 minute. So emotionally loosely holding things as mine is when we lose a thing. I'm sorry. As we emotionally loosely hold things in mind, what happens is when we lose a thing, that mitigates the disappointment. A lot of us fear disappointment. I'm a lot of us, right? I used to always have this fear of getting excited because I expected disappointment. And this is because of long-standing dad issues, right? So I wouldn't allow myself to get excited about things. But as I begin to loosely have my emotional holding of things, right? Like I can still be invested in something, and if I lose it, if it goes away, it is what it is. But I'm also not investing my identity into my personal belongings, the spaces I'm in, because everything is temporary. And so it's be present with it and enjoy it while it lasts. Go ahead and make your way back onto all fours. Feel free to move around for yourself here as needed. And then we'll take one more seated stretch. So have a seat. Ooh, oh, I did. Ooh, these leg days that I've been doing lately, man, they working. All right, so we'll take 3 minutes here. Bring the legs out in front of you. Point the toes up toward the nose. And then take a big inhale, reach the arms above the sky, and then just hinge at the hips so you feel that lengthening of the hamstrings. Place your hands at your toes, ankles, shins, or knees, and we'll take a forward fold here, continuing to breathe. So, gratitude is an antidote of pride, just one. Be grateful for what has been fulfilled to stay in a peaceful state. As we begin to let go of pride, it becomes easy when we see just how silly it is to attach to the label of mine with any of our possessions, right? Like a thing really has no value, or the value is set on it until it becomes mine. And that's when it increases in value. So, why don't you practice this exercise? Instead of calling a thing mine or saying it belongs to me, try objectively naming the thing. So it's a shirt, it's a pair of shoes, it's an orange, right? It's not mine. So as we verbally use language that is more detached, see how that language makes you feel as you use it. All right. And as silly as it might sound at first, just notice what non attachment feels like. And you're using your words, we're using language for this, right? And so the next portion of this is looking at opinions. And then after we finish this stretch, we'll go ahead and work our way onto our backs as well because we're getting towards the end here. So when we see opinions as only opinions, we are invulnerable to prideful anger. Remember, pride is always defensive, and there's a fear of loss associated with pride. So we're always welcoming in attack. So if opinions are an expression of a form of attack, and we can objectively view opinions as only opinions, then we become invulnerable to that symptom of pride and prideful anger, which is that constant conflict. Opinions, they change frequently, and we can place opinions in the category of I like this, I don't like this. It helps us to not be so susceptible to pride and defending things. We can find that people don't attack our likes or dislikes because we have an absence of pride for just loving a thing or not loving a thing. What we truly cherish is protected by our reverence. What do you say to someone who says they like a thing just because they like a thing? Right? It might be a quirky thing or a weird thing. Like I watch anime. I love anime. I used to think people would, make fun of me because I like watching cartoons and I'm supposed to be an adult or big boy. I'm supposed to watch this. I'm supposed to be into sports, right? And it took me to becoming in my 30s to be like, yo, yeah, I like anime. I like this anime. To realize nobody really cares. I didn't invite any kind of attack. And perhaps it's because of how I hold it in mind. I love anime. I've learned so much from it. Go ahead and work your way out of the posture. You can come up into a seated position. But I've gotten so much of who I am and how I've chosen to exist in this world and do life out of watching anime shows. So no one can attack me. And if they were to attack me, it would just be a matter of, oh, well, I mean, I just like it. I'm not going to try and convert you into liking what I like. You either do or you don't. And that's okay. So we're just left in this place of peace to enjoy what we enjoy. When we can see opinions as opinions and remove the I or my opinion, your opinion, and we begin to just come from a place of joy and gratitude, humility. We start to see the world differently. We start to interact with the world differently as well. Uh, I invite you onto your mat now. If you can make your way down onto your back, you can give yourself a big hug, bringing your knees into your chest. You can rock side to side. And then when you're ready, go ahead and lower the legs and just allow yourself to really surrender into the mat. Use your body language to just surrender. What does it feel like to surrender for you? Take a deep breath in and then just relax everything. Exhale. Let your palms be open toward the ceiling. If you feel safe to do so, please close your eyes. Let your toes fall to the wayside and just get comfortable. Right? Notice if there's any sensations in your body that maybe need some awareness, a little bit of breath, or maybe some extension. Please take that for yourself. So what happens when we let go of pride? We're left in peace to just enjoy what we enjoy and like what we like. Pride comes from this idea of better than and pushing it onto people around us. Think about like fad diets, right? Like, everybody jokes about vegans. How do you know if person's vegan? They'll tell you, right? That's one of the running jokes. But people always want to push the newest diet or fad onto another person. Oh, I've been trying this out and I heard about this thing. Have you heard about this? And that's one way that that's one of those pride things. There's this pride of community, right? Like, oh, we're better because we do things this way. We don't do those things. We do these things. And you should do these things. That starts to become our identity. We become identified with the activity or the community that we're associated with. So people who just eat how they eat and enjoy it don't say much about it. People who go to Comic Con conventions because they enjoy Comic Con conventions, you ain't really gonna hear about it. It's oftentimes a very pleasant surprise when you talk to someone and you learn something about them that you may not have thought. You're like, oh, I didn't know that about you. And you're just surprised. You may not even invite any defensiveness. There's no, haha, what? You, Comic Con, dressing up? What? That's where we get into that like pridefulness. And it's very one sided because the other person may not just say, they may not invest in the attack or get defensive. They're just like, oh, yeah, I like dressing up and going to Comic Con. It's fun. I like it. That's the end of it. So, how we hold a thing in mind emotionally is the emotion that it draws in. Y'all, this is so powerful. When we hold things in mind with gratitude, we invite more gratitude. When we hold things in mind from a prideful sense, we invite more attack, more pride, more prideful people come at us. And we're just constantly volleying this negativity, this negative energy, more and more pride. So let's see what happens when we start to put joy and gratitude and humility out into the world. When we start to live in that place, live in that space, think about a thing that you feel a sense of pride for. If you're proud of yourself for something, and now what does it look like to reverse that to a place of gratitude, to not have to explain yourself, to be appreciative of all of the belongings, the possessions that you've accumulated over the years, and to have the mindset of, oh, well, if somebody takes it, they must need it. If I lose it, it's okay. Like, I'm grateful for the time that I had with it. And again, this goes back to presence. How present can you be with the real emotion that you're having? And then decide, is this what I want to do or not? And even with the letting go techniques, it's always a choice. You are not pressured to do this. You are free to let go. You are free not to. Pride's resistance to being surrendered is, in fact, pride. And pride underlines opinions in most cases. So, as we become resistant to surrendering pride, which is, I mean, I think that this is the emotion just before acceptance or courage. I'll have to double check, but I think that that's going to be next week's session on courage. But when we can start to see that there's pride to not letting go, right? Because who were we before learning about pride? We were more than likely a prideful person. There might have been a lot of ego involved, and we associated ourselves with our belongings, our social groups. But now we're seeing that maybe that's not the best route. Maybe there's another way. Joy, gratitude, humility, these are other ways. So, open mindedness is so attractive to us because we are susceptible to having our opinions changed and understanding that opinions do just that, they change. Pride can blind us to beneficial things, and it prevents us from seeing what is totally obvious, our own limitations. Letting go of pride allows help to come in where we might have difficulty. Think about how challenging it is to ask for help or accept help when we're coming from a place of pride. As we do this, it unlocks the door to receiving that which is most beneficial to us. We can let pride go and begin to receive courage, acceptance, and joy. And I wish that for you. I wish that for everyone. And as you lie here and sit with the remainder of the time that you set aside for yourself, begin to practice the things that you may be attached to psychologically or possessions that you have. Begin to, instead of calling them mine or calling it my, whatever it is, start to loosely use language that objectively points it out. It's a whatever this is. It's an whatever. It's not my PS5. It's a PS5. It's not my couch. It's a couch. It's not my bathroom. It's the or a bathroom, right? So nothing becomes yours possessively, right? Like, yeah, it's a possession. You see, I just did it right there. It's a possession. Doesn't necessarily need to be associated with mine. And this is just a practice. And as you do this, you'll get better at it. And as you say it, maybe you start to behave in a way that aligns with it, and maybe beliefs change about things, and you start to see the world around you begin to change and respond to you at that level of gratitude, joy, and acceptance. I'm Courtney Brain. This is Self Yoga, the Letting Go series. If you enjoyed this, please consider making a donation to Self, which is a 501c3 nonprofit providing emotional wellness resources for men. Thank you.